So, Rich, fantastic to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Guy.
Well, really pleased to have you here. I say this and I keep saying it and I probably will never stop. I, of course, know who you are. It'd be great just to get an introduction from you as to who you are and what you put your focus into.
Thank you, Guy. Well, I'm a husband and a father of three, but that's probably not why you invited me here today. I'm currently the Chief Medical Director of Employee Health and Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins Medicine.
And that's such a great starting point for me, because I think there's so much that we can talk about. I do want to get onto A Cure for the Common Company, which is a book that you have, and I think there's a lot of information in there that we can make use of. When you gave that job title, I think it would be super useful for people to have a sense of just what that entails. If you kind of said, hey, do you know what, if I think about what my work life is and where I put my energy and my focus and what the organisation is asking me or wanting me to achieve, talk us through that kind of thing so we can get some context around the day job, and then we can have more conversation.
Sure. I mean, at a high level, I support the health and well-being of the 42,000 employees at Johns Hopkins Medicine. And it's intentionally broad because for 42,000 people, there are a lot of different needs. And so strategically, we're creating a culture of well-being so that the notion of being well through the workday is normalized. From an operational perspective, that means we need to put benefits in place. We need to make sure the environment is set up so that it's easier for people to have healthy choices. It means creating peer support mechanisms so colleagues are supporting each other's well-being journey. And it also means training our leaders to know their role in supporting health and well-being on their teams.
One of the things I come across, Rich, is that when you get into this space of health or well-being or psychological safety or whatever these words are, they seem to have almost like a barometer of response from people, where some people really, it makes sense, absolutely, I'm all in, anything I can do. And for others, it might sound a little bit wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. It might sound a little bit, dare I use, I'm almost going to do the flying inverted, woke. And of course, you're in a particular institution where this would make more sense. But I'm also going to have probably an audience that may or may not raise an eyebrow even on the topic of well-being, other than, well, look, as long as people are safe and, there's nothing fundamentally dangerous and, we're not bullying people, then what else is there to do? So I think I'd really like to get your thoughts on maybe what is well-being in a workplace. And that is maybe the vaguest question you've ever been asked. But just, what is it? What does it entail? What is it not, perhaps?
Well, Guy, it is true that when you talk about, or when I talk about well-being in the workplace, some people are all in and some people are kind of like puzzled or skeptical. However, I think if you ask 100 people at a cocktail party if they're interested in being healthy, I'd probably say at least 99 would say yes. So I don't think it's a matter of whether or not people think it's good to be healthy and well. I think it's a matter of whether or not people believe that we can actually do something effective in the workplace. And there might be a number of reasons why they're skeptical. And one of the biggest is probably because for some organizations, they've been trying for 20, 30 years and spending money, and they're not seeing the results, which is really unfortunate, but not unexpected, because many companies have basically outsourced their health and well-being strategy instead of bringing someone qualified into the organization and training their leaders at all levels on their role in supporting the health and well-being of their team. It really doesn't have to be an expensive strategy. Now, what is well-being in the workplace? Well-being is a journey that spans the different parts of our lives which bring us fulfillment and health. And so you'll hear people talk about, well, well-being is nutrition and it's exercise and it's social. Yes, it's all of those things, but more than anything else, well-being is whatever the individual defines it as. So, Guy, your well-being needs are probably different than mine. And what makes this challenging in the workplace is that you cannot create 40,000 customized well-being plans. What's really much more effective is to create a well-being culture where everybody's well-being journey is supported.
And that's really intriguing to me because at any point in a person's career, they may be absolutely driving forward. They're excited about the work that they're doing and they're putting in hours that go beyond the contract, but it's by their own choice. All the way through to, listen, I'm a solid individual, but I want to come, do a flipping good job, but then I want to go home. So I'm in a different place, a different space. And as if you think about anybody's, I guess, the rhythm of somebody's life, that could change from year to year or decade to decade. So I guess, as you say, it's not just that each person's different, but it changes in a person's lifetime. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I know personally, I've had different well-being needs throughout my life, and just knowing our life cycles and our change of jobs, change of family circumstances, change of communities, we absolutely have different well-being needs through the course of our life.
So when I think of John Hopkins, which has a international brand, it's known by most people in some way or another, maybe. And as the layman looking in, I would go, that's an organisation that is dedicated to health. So by definition, one would expect this to be high on the agenda. But I also know from working in organisations that it's got human beings in it, and human beings have their agendas and their motivations and their budgets and their targets and their whatever that might be. So I wonder, how does an organisation know that it is on track or in deficit?
In the well-being space?
Yes, because even I imagine that within an organisation such as John Hopkins, as a layman, I could go, well, of course, they all buy into it there. But you've got 42,000 people. So there's got to be a distribution curve of leaders and managers that either are educated or not so well educated or do or don't care because of what's going on for them, and etc. So I think how do you offer that idea of how do we know? How do we calibrate? And it's probably not an exact science, but how do we know that we're more on track than not?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. And we are certainly all about health and well-being. And unfortunately, for many healthcare workers, that means putting their patients first and putting themselves second. So this is not exclusive to Johns Hopkins. This is part of the culture of healthcare professionals, which creates a little bit of a challenge to change the thought process and help each other, our coworkers, appreciate that we need to be well to do our best in helping others be well. So, Guy, there are a number of different ways to measure our effectiveness and our current state. In fact, there's a whole chapter in my book. The chapter title is Counting Culture. I'm just going to give you a few ways to know whether or not we're moving in the right direction. One really is a global question about how our employees perceive whether the employer, Johns Hopkins, is supporting their health and well-being. People want to feel like their employer is taking care of them. Richard Barrett, one of your colleagues there in England, wrote a book called The Value Driven Organization. I believe that's the name of the book. And the whole book is about this. Values that support caring of employees lead to employees staying longer, the organization being more successful, and the organization being more profitable. So one way that we look at this guy is this perception of whether or not our employees feel as though we are caring for them. Another way that we look at how we're building this culture of health or well-being culture is that we have a survey literally called the Culture of Health Survey. And we ask our employees 12 questions, 2 questions from each of the 6 well-being culture building blocks that we intentionally and strategically work towards optimizing. And then we have a whole other number of different ways, like how many people are smoking, what's the blood pressure of the population, how are people answering questions on the health assessment. So it's both opinion as well as some fact or data.
And you've got an unusually knowledgeable group of people on this topic that have the capacity to self-evaluate or have an awareness of a colleague. And that's quite interesting just to recognise that. And as I think about other organisations that probably don't have that heightened level of capability.
Well, Guy, that's I know why the first thought is that, wow, that's an institution of higher education, and all those people are pretty bright and well educated. And I have to say, it's reasonable to think that way, and yet we have 42,000 employees, and that means we have some employees who haven't finished high school, and some who have a medical degree and a PhD. We have the full spectrum, and we are very intentional in making sure that we're supporting the full spectrum. Because if we don't support the people who keep our hospitals open, then we don't have a place for our patients to come to or for our doctors to provide health care. And so, it poses a challenge for us to support everybody, and yet it's a very doable path if we stay intentional to our well-being culture strategy.
And when I hear that, I think about the case for building a workplace well-being culture, that a lot of industries don't have that connection to healthcare, other than, of course, they have human beings in it, and by definition, it's a topic that's relevant. What is the case for building a workplace well-being culture that, even though there might be, I guess, stuff in the ether around that, can you point at specific things that go not just from external reports, but we at John Hopkins can absolutely say that it makes a difference?
Well, sure. Let me talk about healthcare first, and then let me expand it to every other industry. Absolutely, it makes a difference when healthcare workers are healthy and well. They are much better able to focus and do a highly effective job of caring, which means fewer accidents in the workplace, which means better patient care, which means better patient satisfaction scores. There is a very high correlation between the health and well-being of your doctor and their team and the care they can deliver to you. So, Guy, make sure your healthcare team is happy and healthy, or else maybe look for a different practice. Now, as far as every other industry is concerned, some of the same concepts exist and then more. So, for example, if your team is healthy and well, they're less likely to have an accident on the job. And that means they're going to stay in the workplace and not be out with a sprained ankle. And you're not going to have to get, whatever compensation packages in place because they are on a disability plan. When people feel healthy and well, they're much more likely to collaborate. And that means their team is going to be more effective, which means greater success in whatever projects or products your team and organization are putting out. The list goes on, and I don't know what it's like there in England, Guy, but in America, we've seen a lot of people coming and going out of their jobs. And so employee retention and employee recruitment is highly dependent on whether or not people feel like their manager and their employer is being very intentional to support their health and well-being. If people don't feel, if people feel like their job is killing them, literally, they will leave. They will go find another place to work where they feel like their health and well-being is supported.
I think there was this phrase in the world around the Great Resignation. Mm-hmm. However, I've come to more of a belief that was a little bit COVID specific. But I think, if you've got bills to pay, you've got bills to pay. But the phrase quiet quitting does seem to resonate with me. I don't think some people, maybe they've retired or whatever it is, they have the opportunity to go, I'm out. But I think other people downgrade. They quit from maybe wanting to be promoted. They go, do you know what? I look up the line and I go, I don't know if I want to live like that. So they might not be quitting as in they're going to be lazy, but they're just opting out. They're quitting from that normal trajectory. And some people are, I'm not going to work to rule. I'm not going into a sabotage space, but I'm not going to give my all because if the company doesn't really care, why would I put those extra hours in? So maybe it's not quitting, but it's turning down the dial, perhaps. I do definitely see that.
Yeah, I see it also. And, depending on what part of the workforce, I think it's probably a healthy path for many people. I agree. I think COVID has caused us to think differently about our lives and about our jobs. And too many people have been harming their health by going the extra mile, which means more hours working at work, and then even staying connected in the evening and on the weekends. And it's not good. If you want to enjoy your retirement, you better make sure you don't put your body through the ringer those years that we are working to make sure we can put a roof over our head and food in our stomachs.
Yes, I think that's very relevant. When I look at your book, and I just want to reiterate the name of it, A Cure for the Common Company, a Wellbeing Prescription for Happiness. Have I got that right? I think I have. Yes. So, oh yeah, fantastic. There we go. And there's a picture of it for those that are a wellbeing prescription for a happier, healthier, and more resilient workplace. Perfect. So, chapter 2. We won't go through by chapter, but I was intrigued by how our subcultures influence our well-being, and that I can hazard a guess, but I'd like you to bring that to life, because anything that says subcultures in it always makes me very interested. So how our subcultures influence our well-being, bring that to life for me.
Sure. Well, let me just level set and share that the culture definition that I use, which happens to be Webster's dictionary culture, is the shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of a given group of people. And so companies have cultures across the organization, but then there are subcultures within teams or departments or even work locations. And subcultures really speak to the shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of the people with whom you're closest to for the majority of the day, which usually means all the people who have the same boss. That's what it comes down to. And that subculture could be very supportive of health and well-being, or it might be on the other end of the spectrum, or most likely it's somewhere in between. And it's a matter of a number of items that contribute to that culture. For example, what is the norm around work hours? Do people wake up and the first thing they do is they check their work email while they're brushing their teeth, and then they start replying, and then they get in their car, and when they're at a traffic light, they reply to more emails, and they get to work. They work all day. They come home, and they're checking their emails after dinner. That's one subculture work norm, and then another is, hey, you know what? You start working when you get to work, and when work is over for the day, that's it. Because you need to have boundaries, because if you're not recharging and you're not spending time with your family and friends and exercising outside of work hours, then you're not going to be your best when you come back the next day. Two different norms for two different teams, which greatly impact the individual team members' health and well-being. Now, Guy, I can go on to other areas like peer support and the leader's influence, but that's an example how you could have two different subcultures in work or at work that influence your health and well-being.
In my vocabulary, and it may not be yours, so please substitute your own words here, is I have a sense that some roles, usually lower on the hierarchy, so to speak, are more mechanical. They're more process, more systems orientated, they're more repetitive. So even if it's like being a fireman in some respects, you could say it's a heck of a job, but the job is for the person on the truck that's turning up to the fire. It's the fire that's in front of them. So then you've got that, what I would call the tactical roles, and those are usually management orientated. So yeah, we might have put the fire out during the day, but if you're not in a management role, when you go home, the chances are you don't have to think about it because that's the level that you're operating at. But if you're in a more tactical role, it's budgets and it's training programs and it's whatever it might be. So that ability, but of course then as you go further up the positions, you get paid more. So there's a real burden, I think, that comes with salary. There's a level of expectation that comes with the money that we're going to pay you that almost says, if you make that deal with the devil, then, it's difficult to complain about what it is that you agreed to. So I'm really interested, I guess, particularly in leaders and managers, which is where the podcast is called Leadership Bites. So it's about leaders and people in senior roles that may feel, I don't know if I'm being paid to look after myself. I'm paid a certain amount of money, and I do hear senior people go, at the money we're paying them, they need to manage their own well-being because they're being paid to do this job. And I just wonder if that's something that plays out where with greater seniority and greater salary comes a greater expectation of you're working 7 days a week, you're needed when you're needed, and actually that room for self is very difficult to find.
Everyone has to make their own decisions, Guy. I don't subscribe to the notion that more work means better outcomes. In fact, I believe that when people aren't rested, they're not able to think as clearly and they're less effective. So, the balance might be different for two different leaders. One leader might be just as effective working 80 hours as they would be working 60, but another leader might have a cap of, let's say, 60 hours. And I don't even think it's the number of hours that we're measuring each week. I think it's more about, hey, I'm tired. I can no longer think straight. It's time for me to shut down. And when shut down means not just leaving the physical workplace, but turning off my thoughts around my work and being able to support my own health and well-being, which might mean seeing friends, spending time with family. This notion that, hey, you make a certain amount of money and therefore your well-being is on your own, is wrought with fallacies. We are all impacted by the people around us, and we're disproportionately impacted by our managers. And so if you're making a $500,000 a year and your manager is, really stressing you out, uh, you'll be able to leave a lot of money to your children because you'll be dead. And what a nice gift that you've just created. Listen, this is partly about our decisions and values as much as it is about trying to not accept the status quo and help our leaders understand, hey, you can be just as effective, if not more effective, if you integrate well-being into your leadership role, and it might even result in your talent staying longer, lower healthcare costs, and better outcomes. It really is a win-win for both the organization and the employees.
So how do you offer, or how do we, as people that develop leaders, how do we train people? Because there's the knowledge, there's the topic, and you could say, well, it's like health and safety training. It's
Yeah.
it's not that complex. However, as an ideal, as an ideology, do you get it? I
Yeah.
get it. It's like the relationship with fitness. Does it, like you said, does everybody agree you should be fit? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Intellectually, it's not that difficult to make the jump.
No.
The reality, of course, is whether or not that manifests in leaders going, I am going to manage myself. I am going to make sure that I look after myself. And that doesn't mean I'm going to run a kibbutz. We can still be a high-performing environment. So let's not, it doesn't have to be something, we're dancing around the mulberry bush kind of thing. However, so I don't think the training is just about the knowledge on it, though if you don't understand it, then you need to. But once you understand it, how much effort goes into people holding a position, having an opinion, and contracting and fighting for that right, not to be lazy, because most people don't want to be, but to go, if I'm going to work at this rate, then I know my tempo, I know my vibrations, so to speak, and this is what I need, and then to recognise it in those that work around them. How does the training look, Rich?
Let me just comment first on the perception that, everyone agrees that walking and staying physically fit is good and shouldn't seem too difficult for a leader to remind people to do that, or eat an apple a day to keep the doctor away. And yet, I think that most leaders don't understand the full spectrum of what impacts health and well-being. And even if they do know the full spectrum, they may not have the skills to help support the people on their team to reach their full potential through supporting their health and well-being. So leadership training is about, in the health and well-being space, is twofold. It is about slowing down to understand, am I healthy? Am I well? What is it that I need to be healthier and well? When we start to appreciate our own health and well-being, it gives us more insight into what others on our team might be going through. On the flip side, we will never know everything that's going on with the people who report to us, and therefore we have to have the skills to navigate the workday so that we allow the opportunity for our employees to have their well-being journey supported. Now, Guy, that sounds like a lot of mumbly-gook, and I just want to maybe give some concrete skeleton instead of all this philosophical stuff. So there's 6 building blocks that I believe, when followed or implemented, create a well-being culture, whether it's the team or the organization. And Guy, I'm going to use the phrase plan for success. So that can help our listeners remember these 6 building blocks. So the P in plan stands for peer support. People are greatly influenced by their friends, their coworkers, and essentially their peers. And there are ways to put a positive strategy in place in the workplace where coworkers can support each other's health and well-being needs. The second building block is the L in plan, stands for leadership engagement. There are some very specific things that leaders need to do to support the health and well-being of the people on their team. Now listen, the leader is responsible for all 6 building blocks, but some of the other building blocks, there's other people involved. So peer support, there's obviously the coworkers are involved, but the leadership engagement building block, there are multiple things that are just on the leader's shoulders. The third building block, the N in plan, is for norms. I already gave an example of norms earlier. It's the expected behavior of people on a team. The fourth building block is the first S in success. So remember, the phrase is plan for success. The S in success stands for social climate. The social climate is how we feel about our team. How do we feel about the group we work with? Do we feel included? Do we feel like there's a high level of trust? Are these people I know things about their lives outside of work? The fifth building block, the 2 C's in success, are for culture connection points. These are the nudges. These are the influences that help make it easier for us to make healthy choices or have positive emotions. And there's like a dozen of those. And then the 6th and last building block in the model that we subscribe to is the last S in success. It's shared values. I referred to this earlier in our program, Richard Barrett's book, The Value-Driven Organization, and about having values. An organization that has values that are either literally to support the health and well-being of our employees or something related to it, if they follow those values, it will help both the employees and the organization.
Just bring to life for me the culture connection points. I don't think I fully understood that.
Sure. Well, we are all influenced throughout the day to make decisions that either support our health or go against our health. And when I say health, I don't mean just physical health. I also mean our mental health. So, Guy, if I put a bowl of grapes down in front of you when we start our meeting, you might nibble on some grapes. And if I put a bowl of chocolate down in front of you before our meeting starts, you might have a few pieces of chocolate during our meeting. This is one of the more obvious culture connection points. Food in the workplace. Are we making it easier to make healthy food choices, or are we making it harder? And the environmental design not only influences food, but it also influences how much we move during the day. And it's not just environmental design. There are another 11 culture connection points that help influence our emotions and health choices through the day.
So that's very much at almost like a systems level, what it is that people have around them that make it easier or less easy to facilitate that kind of way of thinking.
I like that. And when we think of a system level approach, it could be the entire organization, right? Because if there's vending machines in your building, that's probably being driven by the organization. But it also could be team level. If you're the manager and you think you're doing something nice by bringing that bowl of chocolate, you may not realize it, but maybe someone on your team has diabetes or someone on your team has a heart condition, and you're making it more difficult for them to stay healthy.
Yeah, and I'm a classic. I'm absolutely fine not eating chocolate until you put chocolate in front of me.
Me too. I'm serious.
No, I'm absolutely golden until I see it.
Yep.
So I'd be interested in that point number 2, the leadership engagement. And I could, anything that requires leadership engagement is about leaders potentially role modeling and paying attention to. But what are, again, let's just bring that to life a little bit, maybe beyond the obvious.
Well, you mentioned role model, and that's one of the things that I discuss in the book. And it's a very important responsibility for the leaders. Now, many leaders do take care of themselves. They just may not do it out in the open. So they may go running early in the morning, or they may do something after work. So they exercise. They may be eating healthy foods, but maybe they're eating their healthy foods by themselves in front of their desk or during their C-suite meetings, and the organization at large can't see their healthy behaviors. So I strongly recommend, if you're a leader and you're not visibly demonstrating some health and well-being activities during the workday, then make it known. Get your marketing communications team involved and get the message out on a regular basis, what you do to stay healthy and well. And maybe start thinking intentionally to make it more visible during the workday. Take a meeting walking around your campus with someone. It's very doable. Not everything is top secret. You can get out there for a half hour and have one of your meetings in that way.
I refer to that as symbolic acts, the things that tell people that there's a symbol of change, or there's a symbol of a permission. There's something there that I can look at, and it's a tangible that says, oh, if he or she is doing it, then that must be okay.
Yeah, when the leader does something, that means it's okay to do it. I mean, it's implicit permission. And the opposite is true as well. If your manager is at their desk during lunch, that kind of sends the message that, hey, we work hard on this team, and you should be working at your desk too. God forbid that you should take a half-hour break to socialize and eat, or take a walk in the middle of the day and refresh your head.
So, Rich, what happens when an organization espouses well-being? They may very well mean it and have intention for it and programs for it. So what are the things that derail even maybe the most well-intended endeavors?
I actually have a chapter called Culture Killers, Guy, for that very reason, that there are a number of things that can get in the way of success. The first one that pops to my mind is ignoring the actual job. As leaders, we need to be very conscious that the actual work that the people on our team do impacts their health and well-being. And so if someone's doing the same job all day, every week, it's going to get monotonous. And part of our well-being is learning or experiencing new things. If there's a way to rotate responsibilities amongst your team, or have people stand in a different part of the production process, you're going to have a much more highly engaged team, and you're likely going to get a better product because there's going to be fewer mistakes. You also will get feedback about different ways to do things because different people might be experiencing the actual work differently. We also need to remove roadblocks to well-being. So if people don't have the right tools to do their job, or their tools are antiquated and they're having to do things in a manner that's much more strenuous than it needs to be because they know that there might be a tool out there that makes it easier, that can be frustrating. And obviously frustrating is on the not well column. So the job is something that's a culture killer, and I think that we need time to just reflect on what is it that the people who report to me need to do their job so that it causes them less stress.
This may be a slightly prickly question, so laugh at me and don't answer it if you don't want to. I get that. That is
Okay.
I'm also. I think most people are good people. You know, I have a sense that context changes people. You know, if you've got a boss that bullies you, it can make you maybe behave in a way that isn't so great, even though you're a good person. So context, you know, can change people. But also there are some people that, and this may be an English phrase, who can play silly buggers. And
I think you're right. I think that is a English. I do think that is an English saying.
And it basically means they're going to turn the opportunity to rail against the machine or to create an environment that means it's just easier for them by playing certain cards, the well-being card. And I think one of the things that I observe is, and it's probably a little bit more US centric, where I noticed, for example, that Twitter was a classic example where people were my day in the office, and they were putting social medias out around. First thing they do is get a cappuccino, and then they went and did a yoga class, and then I had a meeting. Then I went for my fabulous lunch. Then I did yoga again. Then people are thinking, holy schmoly. I think Elon Musk said, is anybody actually working there?
Yeah.
Which obviously then triggered him releasing 75% of the workforce.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is, of course, there are good, hard-working people. There's a distribution curve. Naturally hard-working, don't need any motivation, will work hard. Then you have people that will, if the environment is conducive and it pushes them, they will do so. And as long as it's stretch and there's comfort and they're not being damaged by it, the environment helps them. And then you're going to get those that are, doesn't matter, you know, they're looking for the reason to try and be the tail that wags the dog, if that makes sense. And I wonder if you come across in this space people that are damaging the message of well-being by the fact that they take it too far.
Well, I can't think of a specific instance myself. I can picture that happening. And I think that's the same with other parts of the workplace. I led an occupational medicine office for almost 4 years, Guy. And there were some patients who came in who were, quote, injured on the job. And they, you know, were also probably the recipients of some good acting lessons. And it is a matter of trying to figure out how to set limits and put parameters. But, you know, it's really not an area that I'm thinking is a big issue, because the vast majority of employees are on the other end of the spectrum. They're in situations where their health and well-being is not being given the modest amount of attention that it deserves. And so I look forward to the day, Guy, where that's what's on my challenge plate, is too many employees who are milking the well-being card. I don't know if that's an American phrase, milking something.
Well, I like what you said there, and it's kind of what I was hoping you'd say, which is don't let the few stop it for the many.
Absolutely. I mean, your organization's success depends on the many being well.
I think that's a great phrase, because I do come across people who, when it comes to anything that is on the people side, you know, one of the classic phrases, soft skills, that phrase. And I go, well, you know, there's hard skills go and there's soft skills. I go, well, I don't think it's hard and soft skills. I think it's hard skills, and then there's even harder skills. Yeah. Because if it was soft skills, right, you'd be doing it, right? Yeah. If it was easy, you'd be doing it.
Yeah.
So there is something there about I get about paying attention to the fact that it is, I think I love that phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Yeah.
And not being somebody who's fearful of having the wool pulled over your eyes or being caught out by somebody who did something that it turned out was less than helpful. And you go, yeah, there will be some that play that game, but the company requires the majority to have a sense of well-being. And if we let one or two bad players poison our relationship with it, that can only harm us. And I think that's what I've heard you say, and I think that resonates.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you've got 42,000 people.
Yeah.
Right,
I fortunately have not run into this. I hope none of your listeners get any ideas either.
No, I think it's about saying, but if you come across bad players, don't let them poison the well.
Yeah. And more often I've come across people trying to poison the well by saying, this isn't going to work. We shouldn't have to be responsible for this. This is individuals' responsibility. Why should I have to support the health and well-being of the people on my team?
There's a great clip from Mad Men, that series that sort of set in the marketing industry, and one of the employees says, you never praise me, you never give me time off, you never take an interest in me, and he shouts back, that's what the money's for. And of course it's it's funny because in some respects, yeah, but absolutely no. And that's why it works, because it's in his position of that's what the money's for. You really very clearly say, well, that's a completely invalid argument.
Right.
It's so much more than that. So I love what you've been saying. I think there's something here, and I think that last statement is, it's about the many. Your business needs to be healthy. It needs to be systemically healthy. It needs to have healthy products. It needs to have healthy innovation strategies. It needs to have healthy people. And that doesn't necessarily mean give people gym memberships and, put apples on their desks on a Friday. It's giving them a space to have their own sense of what it means to them. And as long as it's not debilitating to the organisation, give it space, give it a vocabulary, and make it a conversation.
Yeah, it's more complicated than gym memberships and apples, that's for sure. And most leaders don't know how easy it will be for them to support the health and well-being of their team. That's why I wrote the book, A Cure for the Common Company, so that leaders at all levels, from managers up to the C-suite, have a resource to know what they can do. And most of these things are free. You don't have to go out there and spend $1 million.
So I'm going to just start to bring us to a close. I will leave the link for the book in the description. That's A Cure for the Common Company, a well-being prescription for a happier, healthier and more resilient workforce. It is on Amazon because I'm looking at it. It's published by Wiley, and there's a Kindle edition, there's a hardcover edition, and I've placed my order. So boom, there we go. So I'm going to say thank you, Rich, and I'm going to say thank you for those that are listening. I'm going to get you to stay on just for a few minutes to make sure everything's uploaded. But other than that, thank you so much for coming on this episode. Very much appreciated.